Today I'm going to show you how I decorated this split design cake. Come join me. So this cake is going to be two halves of a whole cake. One side is going to be K-pop cake, the other is going to be video game cake. So I started in advance of actually decorating the cake, and it was really about creating all of the little pieces, edible images that were then placed onto fondant and cut out. So here you can see this is after they've been placed onto the fondant, and we're cutting them out and preparing them to put onto the cake. So the ones that are going to be on the side of the cake, they are a thinner piece of fondant, and they will be packaged in Ziploc bags so that they still remain pliable. These ones right here, they're thicker because they're going to be on top of the cake, and I'm going to let them air dry so that they remain harder. They get harder so that they are able to stand stiff on top of the cake instead of being on the side. I also added some Tylose powder to this fondant to help them stay harder. So here, these are going to be really thick. These are going to be the main toppers. And again, making this stiffer using some Tylose powder. And I'm just using some water and peeling off the backing of the edible image and using some water to adhere it to the fondant. Once it's onto the fondant, then we will cut these out and let them harden to be able to use them on top of the cake. So after I get these cut out, I'm going to then use some skewers and screw them into the bottom of each one of these toppers, and that will be used to brace them into the cake to hold them upright on the top of the cake. Here I am adding those skewers to the first one. This is the K-pop topper. You see that I'm cutting them so that they're of equal height. And now I'm working on the second one. Just cutting out the video game topper. Here I am smoothing the edges, and I'm adding that skewer again to each side of the topper, making sure that they're the same length. Now I'm beginning to actually put the cake together and putting some buttercream on the cake board. This is half and half, as I mentioned. One side is confetti with buttercream, vanilla buttercream. The other is chocolate with peanut butter icing. So I'm going to just stack this cake and then crumb coat it. So going back to those toppers, now that they were completed, I put those aside, and for several days prior to actually decorating the cake, I left those dry so that they were really, really hard so that they are able to stand upright. So here I am just applying the crumb coat to the one half of the cake. You'll notice here in a second that I try to do the other cake on the same cake board and then realize that I'm not going to have enough space. And so then I start to do it on a second cake board. Here I am moving on to doing the chocolate peanut butter half. As I mentioned, trying to do it onto the same cake board. I do try it. And I realize that here that I'm bumping my other cake, and I don't want to have to keep fixing it. So here's where I move back to a different board. So I have my crumb coat on with the peanut butter icing, and now I'm going back over it with the color that they want on the cake, and that is a black color. And so now I'm going over it with the final coating of top icing. Going back to the other one, and I'm going over top of that with the final coating of top icing. And I'm going to make sure that those edges are nice and crisp. And here I am just scraping off that top to clean up those edges. Doing the same for the chocolate peanut butter side. And now that I have this one done, I'm putting the other cake back onto that first cake board, and I'm going to begin to decorate this cake. As you see, there's an opening into the center as requested by the customer, and this is the split design cake. So they wanted a drip on both sides of the cake, a purple drip on the teal side, and a fluorescent green drip on the black side. So here I am putting those drips onto the cake. These are buttercream drips. After completing these drips, I'm going to begin to actually decorate each one of the halves of the cake. So I'm going to start with just kind of putting some of the corresponding dollops of icing on each one of the sides and along the borders and on the top. I also want to make sure that I'm putting some white onto the sides as well. And I'm adding some extra right there at the top so that I can brace this topper into that icing. So I'm adding some extra icing in front of and behind the topper to provide some additional support to the topper. And I'm adding those other two toppers for this side that I had done a bit thicker, as I had mentioned when I was initially providing or creating those topper pieces. Now I'm going to go back and do the exact same thing to the other side, adding those dollops of icing in multiple colors, and then adding the topper, providing some additional supports in icing, and then adding those two extra thicker toppers that I had created earlier in the video. Here I am just covering that crease between the two cakes. Adding that topper and providing some additional supports in front of and behind the topper. Once that buttercream sets, it will really provide a great amount of support to the topper to hold it in place. Here I am adding those two thicker toppers, and now I am adding all of those little pieces that we had created in the beginning when I said that I was putting them on thin pieces of fondant. And of course, each side has specific designed pieces that are according to the theme for their respective side. So here I am making some little chocolate squares that I'm going to put around the cake also. Some along the border, some on top. You'll notice I put the pieces along the other side as well. And then I'm going to give it a spray of glitter along the whole sides, on both sides of the cake, each with a different color that matches the theme. And the last thing I'm doing is adding the happy birthday to the two individuals that this cake is to. And that's the reason for the split design of this cake. And with that, this is what the final cake looked like. If you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future content. Here's a visual of the cake up close. Here is each side a little bit closer so you can see in a bit more detail. And so you can see the happy birthday message, a little bit of the back. And again, thank you for joining. Please come again.